Ada came after 4 years from abroad. She saw when she pushed open her door a baby crying in her living room. She was completely stunned. When she saw was her best friend Kemi, carrying that baby like it belonged to her. She saw was her husband Tund, standing beside Kemi like a man guarding his new family. Ada felt her chest tighten because the house she left 4 years ago had become something else. In that moment, she understood that the journey she made to return home had brought her into a different life. Ada did not scream at first, because the shock sat inside her throat like a stone. She stood at the doorway, holding her travel bag while dust from the road still covered her shoes. The baby cried louder and the sound filled the whole room like a warning drum. A small boy ran across the floor and stopped when he noticed the strange woman standing in the doorway. That strange woman was the real owner of the house. Tund's face turned pale when he finally recognized Ada. He moved one step forward and raised his hand slowly like someone greeting a ghost. His mouth opened, but his voice came out weak and unsure. Ada looked at him with quiet eyes that carried pain and anger together. The air inside the house felt heavy, as if a storm had entered through the door. "Ada," Tund said quietly, "you came today." Ada dropped her bag on the floor and stepped inside the house. The sound of the bag hitting the ground echoed across the room like a loud drumbeat. She did not smile, and she did not greet anyone. Instead, she looked carefully at the woman holding the baby. "Kemi Ada," said slowly, "my friend since childhood." Kemi shifted the baby on her hip and avoided Ada's eyes. The baby cried harder and pressed its small face against her shoulder. Ada took another step closer and looked around the room that used to be hers. She noticed children's clothes hanging near the wall and toys lying on the floor. Her voice became cold when she spoke again. "Kemi, why are you inside my house?" No one answered her question immediately because the truth was heavy and shameful. Tund rubbed his forehead while Kemi held the baby tighter in her arms. The small boy moved closer to Kemi and held the edge of her wrapper. He looked up at her with trust and comfort. Then he spoke a single word that cut Ada's heart deeply. "Mama," the boy said. Ada slowly turned her head toward the child. She studied his face carefully, as if she was searching for something she did not want to find. The boy's eyes carried a familiar shape that reminded her of someone. When she looked at Tund again, the answer became clear without anyone explaining it. Her heart began beating harder inside her chest. "How many children?" Ada asked quietly. Tund looked at the floor and did not answer quickly. Kemi's eyes filled with tears, while the baby continued crying. The small boy stayed close to her side and watched the adults carefully. After a long moment, Tund finally forced the truth out of his mouth. His voice sounded weak and ashamed. "Two," he said. Ada slowly walked to a wooden chair and sat down because her legs felt weak. She placed both hands on her knees and stared at the floor for several seconds. 4 years of hard work passed through her mind like a fast river. She remembered washing dishes late at night and cleaning offices before sunrise. She had done all that work so her home would stand strong. "Kemi," Ada said after the silence became too heavy. "Come closer." Kemi hesitated, but she slowly walked toward Ada while carrying the baby. Her steps were slow and careful, like someone walking across broken glass. Ada lifted her head and looked straight into Kemi's eyes. The pain inside Ada's gaze was deep and difficult to face. Kemi lowered her eyes again because shame pressed heavily on her heart. "Did my husband chase you here?" Ada asked quietly. "Or did you walk here by yourself?" Kemi began to cry softly while shaking her head. Tund stepped forward quickly as if he wanted to speak for her. Ada raised her hand and stopped him before he could say anything. Her voice remained calm but strong. "No, Tund," she said. "Today, my friend, will speak first." Outside the house, neighbors had already started gathering near the window. In a village, news travels fast, especially when the news carries trouble. People whispered quietly while trying to hear what was happening inside the house. Some of them felt pity for Ada, while others simply watched with curiosity. The whispers slowly entered the room, like wind passing through an open door. Kemi wiped her face and tried to speak through her tears. "Ada," she said weakly, "you were gone for many years." Ada nodded slowly, because that part was true. She had traveled far away to work, so she could send money home to her husband. Every month she sent letters and savings to keep the household alive. She trusted the two people she loved most to protect what she left behind. Now that trust was standing in front of her like a broken pot. "I did not disappear," Ada said calmly. I wrote letters and sent money every month. Tund lowered his head because he knew her words were true. The money Ada sent had repaired the roof and fed the family many times. The village often praised Ada for her sacrifice and hard work abroad. But sacrifice does not always protect a home when hearts grow weak. Sometimes people follow their own desire instead of loyalty. The village already knows, Tund said quietly. Ada turned her eyes toward him slowly. The village knows what? Se asked. Tund swallowed hard before answering because the truth carried shame. They believed you were not coming back, he said. Ada stood up suddenly and stared at him with disbelief. Did I stop sending money? She asked. No, Tund admitted. Did I stop writing letters? No. Ada spread her hands in frustration as anger rose inside her chest. Then, how did you bury me while I was still alive? The room became silent again because no one had a good answer. Outside, the whispers of the neighbors continued growing louder. The village had already begun forming opinions before hearing the full story. But Ada understood something important in that moment. This problem was no longer only about 3 adults and 2 children. It had become a question for the whole community. In their land, the elders always said a person does not live alone. A home belongs not only to the husband and wife, but also to the people who stand around them. When trust breaks, the wound spreads through the whole village. Ada looked again at Kemi and Tund with steady eyes. Tell the whole story, Ada said slowly. Because now a hard question stood before everyone. If a friend betrays you and a husband forgets you, should a woman fight to take back her home? Or should she step aside and let the community decide where truth really lives? The room remained silent after Ada demanded the whole story. Outside the house, the voices of neighbors continued rising like a restless crowd waiting for judgment. Tund stood near the table, with his head low, while Kemi held the baby and tried to stop her shaking hands. Ada stayed standing in the center of the room, because she refused to sit again until she heard the truth. The 2 children looked from one adult to another, sensing that something serious had broken inside their home. Kemi wiped her tears slowly and tried to speak, but the words struggled to come out. Ada watched her closely without blinking, because she wanted every detail. Tund moved 1 step closer to Kemi, as if he wished to help her carry the heavy story. The baby finally stopped crying and rested quietly against Kemi's shoulder. Kemi then took a deep breath and began. It started after you left the village, she said quietly. At first I only came to visit the house and help Tund with small things. She looked at Ada with shame because she remembered the promise she once made. Ada's face did not soften even for a moment. The room listened carefully as the story began to unfold. When you traveled abroad, everyone believed you would return soon, Kemi continued. During the first year you sent money and letters, and Tund read them to me many times. Tund nodded slowly because that part was true. Ada had written long letters about the cold weather, the long work hours, and her dreams of building a better future for the family. But distance can stretch trust until it becomes weak. Kemi shifted the baby again and continued speaking. In the second year, people began talking in the village, she said. Some said the foreign land had swallowed you and you might never come back. Ida's eyes flashed with anger when she heard those words. She knew how easily rumors could grow when truth traveled slowly. I kept defending you, Kemi said quickly. I told everyone you would return because you were strong. Ada listened without interrupting because she wanted the whole truth, not pieces of it. Tund leaned against the wall and closed his eyes for a moment. The weight of the past pressed heavily on him. One evening a strong storm destroyed part of the roof, Kemi said. Rain poured into the house, and Tund could not repair it alone. She looked down as she remembered that night clearly. The village men were away working in distant farms, and few people were available to help. So she decided to stay and assist. I slept in the spare room that night, Kemi said. At that time, nothing wrong had happened. Ada crossed her arms and continued watching her. The baby moved slightly, but remained asleep. The truth was moving forward slowly, like a tired The days turned into weeks. Kemi continued quietly. I kept helping in the house, because there was always work to do. She explained how she cooked food for Tund and cleaned the compound. At first, it felt like simple kindness between friends. Yet kindness sometimes grows into something dangerous when people forget their boundaries. Tund finally spoke because he could no longer remain silent. I was lonely, he admitted, with a rough voice. The house felt empty after Ada left. He rubbed his hands together while remembering the long, quiet nights. The loneliness inside him had slowly turned into weakness. "I should have stayed strong," he said. Ada stared at him carefully before answering. "Loneliness does not erase loyalty," she said calmly. Her voice was not loud, but it carried sharp truth. The neighbors outside grew quieter as they tried to hear every word. The house had become a small court where hearts were being judged. Kemi continued the story with trembling lips. "One night we argued about the rumors in the village," she said. "Some people said Ada had found a new life abroad." Ada shook her head slowly, because she knew those rumors were lies. She had spent every day working so she could send money home. "That night," Tund cried, Kemi whispered, "he said he felt abandoned." Ada's face hardened when she heard that word. "I never abandoned anyone," she said. Kemi nodded quickly because she knew it was true. Yet the mistake had already happened long ago. One weak moment had opened a door that should never have been opened. After that night, things began changing. "We started depending on each other too much." She looked at the floor as if she could hide from her own confession. The baby stirred softly in her arms. "Soon the village started seeing us together," she said. Outside the house, one old woman shook her head slowly. Many villagers already knew parts of this story, but hearing it openly made the shame heavier. In a close community, actions rarely stay hidden. People watch each other's lives because everyone's choices affect the whole village. "The first child came during the 3rd year," Kemi said softly. Ada closed her eyes briefly when she heard that. "I was already far away working when that happened," she said. "Yes," Tund answered quietly. The silence that followed felt thick and painful. The 2 children in the room played with a small wooden toy, unaware that their lives were part of a great conflict. Ada looked at them with mixed emotions, because they were innocent in this matter. No child chooses the mistakes of adults. "The elders asked questions when the first child was born," Kemi continued. "But Tund told them we believed you were gone forever." Ada opened her eyes again and stared at Tund sharply. She understood now how the village had accepted the new arrangement. "So the story became simple," Ada said slowly. "You both decided my life had ended." Tund lowered his head again. "That was wrong," he admitted. Just then a loud knock sounded on the wooden door. The neighbors outside moved aside as 3 elders stepped forward. They were old men who carried the authority of the village council. Their faces were calm but serious because they understood the weight of the situation. One elder looked at Ada first and spoke slowly. "Daughter, we heard you have returned," he said. Ada nodded respectfully, even though her heart still burned. The elders then looked at Tund and Kemi with firm eyes. The room suddenly felt even more serious than before. "This matter now belongs to the whole community," the elder continued. He paused and looked around the house carefully. The broken trust between these people had already spread through the village like smoke. Everyone understood that the decision made today would teach an important lesson about loyalty and responsibility. The elder then asked the question that no one inside the house had yet answered. "If a woman leaves to struggle for her family," he said slowly, "does the community protect her home? Or does each person follow only their own desire?" The room fell silent again as the weight of that question filled the air. Because now the village itself had to decide what kind of people they wanted to be. The room grew heavier after the elder asked his question. Ada stood still near the center of the house while the villagers slowly pushed the door open and gathered around the compound. No one laughed and no one spoke loudly, because everyone understood the seriousness of the moment. The 2 elders who followed the first man sat down quietly on wooden stools near the doorway. The 3rd elder remained standing as he prepared to guide the discussion. "A home is not only built by 2 people," the standing elder said calmly. "A home stands because the community agrees to protect truth." His eyes moved slowly from Ada to Tunde and then to Kemi. The villagers listened carefully because they knew the decision made today would teach a lesson to everyone. Even the children in the compound became quiet. Ada folded her hands and bowed her head respectfully to the elders. She was angry and hurt, but she still respected the traditions of her people. Interland elders did not rush into judgment because wisdom requires patience. Tund also bowed his head, though shame rested heavily on his face. Kemi shifted the baby in her arms and tried to calm her trembling body. The elder then turned to Ada and spoke gently. "Daughter, you traveled far from home. he said. "Tell us why you left the village." Ada lifted her head slowly and looked at the gathered faces around her. Many neighbors she had known since childhood were standing outside the doorway watching. Some looked at her with sympathy, while others waited carefully to hear every detail. She knew this was her moment to explain her struggle. "I left because our farm was failing," Ada said clearly. "Tund and I decided that one of us must go and work in another country." She explained how the decision had been difficult but necessary for their future. The village had gathered years ago to wish her good luck before she traveled. "I promised to return," Ada continued, "and I kept sending money every month." The elder nodded slowly because many villagers had indeed seen the money helping Tun's household. Roof repairs had been done, and food had been purchased during hard seasons. Ada's sacrifice had been visible even from far away, yet distance had also created a space where doubt and loneliness could grow. The elder then turned toward Tun. "Son, you heard your wife's words?" Said calmly. "Tell the community why you allowed another woman into her home." Tun swallowed hard before answering because many eyes were watching him. He knew that excuses would not protect him now. In a small village, people value truth more than clever words. "I became weak," he admitted. His voice sounded rough and tired as he continued speaking. He explained how loneliness had slowly taken control of his thoughts. Every day, the empty house reminded him of the long distance between him and his wife. "Rumors started spreading," Tun said. "People said Ada might never return." Several villagers nodded quietly because they remembered those rumors. Some had believed them while others had defended Ada's loyalty. Rumors often grow quickly when truth travels slowly across long distances. "I should not have listened to those voices," Tun said. The elders studied him carefully before asking another question. "When the first child was born, why did you not wait longer for your wife to return?" Tun lowered his eyes again because the answer carried shame. "I believed she had started a new life abroad," Said softly. Ada shook her head slowly when she heard that explanation. She remembered the many nights she had spent alone in a foreign city working extra hours to support the home she loved. Every sacrifice she made now felt like a broken promise. "I never stopped thinking about this village," Ada said quietly. The elder nodded and then turned toward Kemi. "Daughter, you were Ada's friend before all this happened," he said. "Tell us why you crossed the line between kindness and betrayal." Kemi looked around the room nervously because the villagers were watching her closely. The baby rested quietly against her chest while the small boy played with a wooden toy near her feet. She knew that every word she spoke would shape the future of her children. "At first, I only wanted to help," Kemi said. She explained how she had come to assist Tund after the storm damaged the roof. Cooking food and cleaning the compound had seemed like simple acts of friendship. But friendship slowly changed when emotions became confused. "I was lonely too," Kemi admitted. Her own husband had abandoned her long before Ada traveled abroad. The loneliness she carried made it easier for her to accept comfort from someone else. Yet she also knew that loneliness could not justify betrayal. "I should have left the house," she said quietly. The elder listened carefully without interrupting her confession. Around them, the villagers whispered among themselves as they considered the story. Some felt pity for Kemi, while others believed she had broken a sacred trust. One old woman finally spoke from the crowd. "A friend should guard the home of her sister," she said firmly. Several villagers nodded in agreement, because loyalty between friends is highly valued in their culture. Betrayal between close companions often wounds deeper than betrayal from strangers. The tension inside the compound continued rising. The elder raised his hand gently to restore silence. "In this village we teach that a person belongs to the community," he said. "When one person suffers, the community must respond with wisdom." He paused and looked at the two children who were now playing quietly together. Their laughter sounded innocent and unaware of the conflict around them. The elder understood that the decision made today would shape their future. "Children should not carry the punishment of adult mistakes," he said. Ada looked at the children and felt a deep struggle inside her heart. She was angry at Tund and Kimi, but the children were innocent. In her culture, children are always protected even when adults fail. The elder then asked Ada a serious question. "Daughter, what do you want from this situation?" Ada remained silent for several seconds while she searched her heart for the answer. Revenge might bring satisfaction for a moment, but it would not heal the broken relationships. Yet forgiveness would also demand great strength from her wounded heart. "I want truth to stand," Ada said finally. She explained that the community must decide whether promises still carry meaning in their village. If people could break trust easily, then the strength of the community would slowly disappear. Marriage is not only between two people, Ada said. It is also a promise before the community. The elder nodded slowly, because her words carried wisdom. The villagers also understood the truth behind her statement. A strong community survives only when its members respect loyalty and responsibility. The elder looked at Tund and Kimi again. "Do you accept that you broke that promise?" he asked. Both of them answered quietly, "Yes." The elder then looked at the gathered villagers. "The community must now decide what justice looks like," he said. But the decision would not be simple, because Ada's heart still carried pain. Tund's heart carried shame, and two innocent children stood in the middle of their broken story. The elder slowly lifted his walking stick and spoke one final sentence. "The hardest question remains before us," he said. "If forgiveness can rebuild a home, should the community guide these people back together? Or should truth demand that some doors remain forever closed?" The compound remained silent after the elder asked the final question. Villagers looked at one another because the decision before them was heavy. No one wanted to speak too quickly about a matter that touched loyalty, marriage, and friendship. Ada stood quietly, while Tund and Kemi remained near the wall, with their heads lowered. The two children continued playing with their wooden toy, unaware that their future was being discussed. The elder slowly sat down on the stool beside the doorway. His old eyes moved carefully across the gathered faces of the villagers. He knew that justice in a community must come from shared wisdom, not from anger alone. When people judge too quickly, they often regret the decision later. For that reason, he allowed the villagers to speak their minds. A middle-aged farmer named Bayo stepped forward first. Bayo had known Ada since she was a small girl running through the village paths. He removed his cap and cleared his throat before speaking. His voice was steady because he believed strongly in fairness. Many villagers respected him for his honest nature. "Ada left this village to help her family," Bayo said. "We all saw her working hard from far away." Several villagers nodded in agreement because they remembered the money she sent. The farmer continued speaking with calm confidence. "If sacrifice has no protection, then nobody will trust the community again." A young woman from the crowd then raised her voice gently. She was a mother who often worked beside Kemi in the village market. Her face carried concern as she looked at the small children playing on the ground. The children's laughter seemed too innocent for the conflict surrounding them. She folded her arms before speaking. "But these children are also part of our village," she said. "They did not choose this trouble." Some villagers murmured quietly because they understood her point. In their culture, children must always be protected from the mistakes of adults. Ignoring their future would only create new problems later. Another man stepped forward with a serious expression. His name was Sola, and he had always been known for speaking directly. He looked at Tund with disappointment before addressing the elders. The crowd became quiet again as he prepared to share his thoughts. Everyone respected his courage to speak plainly. "Tund broke his promise," Sola said firmly. "Marriage is not a cloth that can be changed whenever someone feels lonely." Several elders nodded slowly, because they agreed with that statement. A promise made before the community carries great weight. Breaking such a promise damages more than one household. Tund shifted his feet nervously while listening to the villagers speak about his actions. Shame burned deeply inside his chest because every word reminded him of his failure. He wanted to defend himself, yet he knew the truth could not be hidden. The long years without Ada had weakened his discipline and judgment. Now the consequences stood clearly before him. Kemi also listened with trembling hands while holding the baby close to her body. Each voice from the crowd felt like a stone dropping on her heart. She remembered the many times Ada had helped her when they were younger. Their friendship had once been strong enough to survive any hardship. Now that friendship had become the center of public shame. The elder raised his hand again to quiet the growing discussion. His calm authority slowly restored silence among the villagers. He then turned toward Ada with thoughtful eyes. The most important voice in this matter still belonged to the woman who had suffered the betrayal. "Duh," the elder said gently. "You have heard the community speak." Ada lifted her head and looked around the compound. The faces of neighbors surrounded her, like a circle of witnesses. Some carried sympathy while others showed concern for the future of the children. She felt the weight of every gaze resting on her shoulders. This decision would shape not only her life, but also the moral strength of the village. "I left this village with trust in my heart," Ada said slowly. "I believed my husband and my friend would protect the home we built together." Her voice remained calm, yet pain was visible in her eyes. Many villagers felt their hearts tighten as they listened to her speak. Betrayal from close companions always wounds deeply. Ada paused for a moment before continuing. The silence around her allowed every word to travel clearly through the compound. Even the elders leaned slightly forward to hear her thoughts. What she said next would influence the final judgment. "Loneliness is real," Ada admitted, "but loyalty should be stronger than loneliness." Tund lowered his head even further when he heard those words. The truth inside them cut deeply into his conscience. He remembered the night he first allowed his feelings to cross the boundary of loyalty. That moment had seemed small at the time, yet it had changed everything. Kemi wiped fresh tears from her cheeks while listening to Ada's voice. She expected anger and harsh words, but Ada's calm tone made the situation even heavier. When someone speaks with quiet truth instead of loud rage, people listen more carefully. Kemi knew that nothing she said could erase what had happened. The elder then asked another important question. "Ada, do you want your husband to leave this house?" The compound became completely silent as everyone waited for her answer. Even the children stopped their game for a moment, as if they could feel the seriousness of the moment. Ada looked at Tande, then at Kemi, and finally at the small boy holding the wooden toy. Her heart felt pulled in several directions at once. "I want justice," Ada said quietly. The elder nodded slowly, because justice can take many forms. Sometimes justice requires separation, and sometimes it demands responsibility. The challenge is knowing which path will strengthen the community instead of weakening it. Wisdom often grows from difficult decisions. Ada continued speaking while the villagers listened carefully. "If people break promises and face no consequence, then promises will lose their meaning," she said. "But if we destroy every broken person, the community will also suffer." Her words showed that she was thinking beyond her personal pain. The elders appreciated that wisdom. The crowd murmured quietly as they considered her statement. Balancing mercy and responsibility has always been difficult for communities. Too much punishment creates fear, while too much forgiveness encourages carelessness. The village needed a decision that would teach both lessons. The eldest elder slowly stood up again and leaned on his walking stick. His voice carried calm authority when he addressed the crowd. Everyone turned toward him because they knew the discussion was moving toward a conclusion. "This matter is not only about anger or sympathy," he said. He paused and looked at the children once more before continuing. "It is about what kind of community we want our children to inherit." The villagers listened with serious attention because the elder's words touched the heart of the issue. A community survives when its people protect both truth and compassion. Ignoring either one can lead to deeper problems in the future. The elder then made an announcement that surprised many people in the compound. "The council will withdraw for a short time to discuss the final judgment," he said. A quiet wave moved through the crowd as the elders prepared to step away. The decision they were about to make would affect the lives of everyone standing there. Ada, Tanden, Kemi waited silently while the elders walked toward the shade of a nearby tree. But one difficult question still remained hanging in the air. When the elders returned, would their judgment restore balance to the community, or break this family apart forever? The elders remained under the large tree for a long time, while the villagers waited quietly in the compound. No one laughed or spoke loudly, because everyone understood the seriousness of the moment. Ada stood beside the doorway, with her arms folded, while Tund and Kemi remained a few steps behind her. The two children sat on the ground, playing with the wooden toy, still unaware that their future depended on the words of the elders. Every eye in the village stayed fixed on the tree where the council was discussing the judgment. After some time, the elders slowly stood up and began walking back toward the house. The villagers moved aside respectfully to create a clear path for them. Their faces looked thoughtful and heavy, because the decision they carried was not simple. The eldest elder leaned on his walking stick as he stepped into the center of the compound. When he raised his hand, the crowd immediately became silent again. "We have listened to every voice," the elder began calmly. "We have heard the pain of Ada, the shame of Tund, and the regret of Kemi." His eyes moved slowly across the crowd while he spoke. The villagers waited patiently, because the elder never rushed important words. Justice must be spoken carefully, so that everyone understands its meaning. "In our land," the elder continued, "a person does not live only for himself. Several villagers nodded quietly, because they had heard that teaching since childhood. The strength of a community comes from the way people protect one another's trust. When someone breaks that trust, the community must respond with wisdom and fairness. Only then can harmony return. The elder turned toward Tund and looked directly into his eyes. Tund felt his heart beating hard inside his chest because he knew his actions had brought shame to his household. He kept his head lowered while waiting for the judgment to continue. The entire compound watched the moment carefully. "Tund," the elder said firmly, "you broke the promise you made before this community." Tund nodded slowly, because he could not deny that truth. The memory of his wedding day passed through his mind as the elder spoke. On that day he had promised to protect Ada and honor their marriage. Now those promises felt like distant words he had failed to keep. "You allowed loneliness to guide your actions instead of loyalty," the elder continued. "A husband must guard the home, even when distance and hardship test his strength." His voice remained calm, but strong enough for everyone to hear. The lesson was not only for Tund, but also for every man listening in the crowd. The elder then turned his attention toward Camille. She tightened her arms around the baby and lowered her eyes in shame. The villagers watched her closely, because betrayal between friends is often more painful than betrayal between strangers. Camille knew she must face the truth openly. "Camille," the elder said gently but firmly, "you were trusted as a sister in Ada's home." Tears slowly rolled down her cheeks as she listened to those words. She remembered the many times Ada had shared food, laughter, and secrets with her. That friendship had once been strong and joyful. Now it had become a wound that could not easily heal. "A friend must protect the home of her sister," the elder continued. "Instead, you crossed the boundary that should never be crossed." The crowd murmured quietly because everyone understood the seriousness of that mistake. Trust between friends forms one of the strongest bonds in their community. The elder paused for a moment before continuing the judgment. His eyes moved toward the two children who were still playing on the ground. Their small laughter reminded everyone that innocence must always be protected. The elder spoke again with careful wisdom. "But the children standing here today did not create this trouble," he said. Several villagers nodded in agreement. In their culture, children must never carry the punishment of adult mistakes. The future of the community depends on how well the young ones are protected and guided. The elder wanted his decision to reflect that belief. "Ada," the elder said, as he turned toward her. Ada lifted her head and met his gaze calmly. The pain in her heart had not disappeared, but she remained strong and respectful. She had waited patiently for the community's wisdom. Now she prepared herself to hear their final judgment. "You showed courage by returning and speaking the truth," the elder said. "You also showed wisdom by thinking about the future of the children." Ada listened quietly because she did not want praise, only fairness. Still, the elder's words acknowledged the strength she had shown during the painful discussion. "The council has decided that the house belongs to Ada," the elder announced. A soft wave of murmurs moved through the villagers as they absorbed the meaning of that statement. The house Ada had built with her sacrifice would remain under her authority. Tund and Kemi both felt the weight of that decision immediately. "Tund," the elder continued, "you must remain in the home as the father of the children, but you must rebuild the trust you destroyed." Tund nodded slowly because he understood the responsibility placed upon him. Rebuilding trust would require patience and honest effort. The community would be watching his actions carefully from this day forward. "Kemi," the elder said next, "you cannot remain as Tund's partner in this house." Kemi's shoulders trembled as she heard those words. She had expected punishment, yet the reality still hurt deeply. The villagers remained silent while she struggled with her emotions. The baby in her arms stirred gently, but did not cry. "You may stay in the village because your children belong here," the elder continued, "but you must live separately and rebuild your dignity through honest work." His voice carried both firmness and mercy. The decision allowed Kemi a chance to recover her place in the community without repeating the same mistake. Ada listened carefully to the judgment while the crowd considered the outcome. The decision balanced justice with compassion. It recognized Ada's sacrifice while protecting the future of the children. At the same time, it reminded everyone that broken promises carry serious consequences. The elder looked at the three adults one final time before finishing his words. "This decision will not erase the pain," he said, "but it gives each of you a path to rebuild your lives." The villagers slowly began murmuring again as they discussed the judgment among themselves. Some believed it was wise, while others wondered whether forgiveness could truly heal such deep wounds. Yet everyone agreed that the lesson was important for the entire community. Ada stood quietly while the crowd moved around her. She felt relief that her sacrifice had been recognized, but her heart still carried heavy emotions. Tund looked at her with regret and uncertainty, unsure whether their relationship could ever recover. Kemi held her baby tightly as she prepared to face a new and difficult future. But even after the elders spoke their decision, one question still remained inside Ada's heart. Would justice alone be enough to rebuild trust between broken people, or would the wounds of betrayal continue shaping their lives forever? The compound slowly became quieter after the elders finished their judgment. Villagers began returning to their homes while discussing what they had just witnessed. Some believed the decision was wise because it protected the children and respected Ada's sacrifice. Others wondered whether broken trust could truly be repaired with time. Ada remained standing in the doorway of the house, watching as the crowd slowly disappeared down the village paths. Tund stood a few steps behind her, with his head lowered. He knew the elders had given him a second chance, but that chance carried heavy responsibility. Rebuilding trust would not happen quickly, and the whole village would be watching his actions. Kemi remained near the edge of the compound holding her baby, while the small boy held her wrapper. The judgment had separated her from the house, but it had not removed the pain she carried inside her heart. The eldest elder slowly approached Ada one last time before leaving. His walking stick tapped softly against the ground as he came closer. Ada turned to face him with quiet respect because she understood the wisdom he carried. The elder studied her face carefully before speaking. "Daughter, today you carried great strength," he said gently. Ada nodded slowly but did not smile. Strength often grows from suffering, and her heart still felt heavy. She had returned home expecting joy, yet she found betrayal waiting inside her own house. The elder understood that true healing would take time. "Justice has spoken," the elder continued. "Now the future depends on the choices each of you make." Ada listened carefully to those words because they carried deep meaning. The elders could give judgment, but they could not control the hearts of the people involved. Each person would now decide whether to build peace or allow bitterness to grow. After the elder left, Ada slowly walked into the house. The room looked different now, even though nothing had moved. Memories of the past and the painful events of the day filled the air. Tund followed quietly behind her, unsure whether he should speak. "Ada," he said softly. She turned to look at him with calm but tired eyes. The anger she felt earlier had cooled, but the wound was still fresh. Tund struggled to find the right words because he knew simple apologies could not repair such deep damage. "I failed you," he said finally. Ada did not answer immediately because she wanted to choose her words carefully. Anger might release her pain for a moment, but wisdom demanded something stronger. The house had already witnessed too much conflict. What happened next would shape the future of everyone involved. "You did fail," Ada said calmly. Tund nodded slowly because he expected that response. The truth could not be softened with excuses, yet Ada continued, speaking with a voice that carried both honesty and thoughtfulness. "But failure does not have to be the end of a person's story," she said. Tund looked up with surprise when he heard those words. He had expected only anger and rejection. Instead, he heard the possibility of change. Ada was not forgetting the past, but she was thinking about the future. "You must earn trust again," Ada continued. Tund nodded quickly, because he understood that responsibility. Rebuilding trust would require patience and honest effort every day. The village would notice whether his actions matched his promises. This time, he could not allow weakness to guide him. Outside the house, Kemi slowly walked toward the village road with her 2 children. The baby rested quietly against her shoulder while the small boy walked beside her. She did not know exactly where she would live yet, but she trusted that the village would help her find a place. Starting again would not be easy, but she had accepted the elder's judgment. As she walked away, she remembered the many years she had spent laughing with Ada as a close friend. Those memories now felt distant and painful. She wished she could return to the moment when their friendship was still strong and unbroken. But time does not move backward, and mistakes cannot be erased. That evening the sun slowly began setting behind the trees of the village. The warm orange light spread across the rooftops and the dusty paths. Ada stood outside the house, watching the sunset quietly. The events of the day continued moving through her mind like a slow river. Tund joined her beside the doorway without speaking. They both looked toward the horizon, where the last light was fading. The silence between them felt heavy but not angry. Sometimes silence gives people space to think clearly. After a while, Ida spoke again. "Our village believes something important," she said. Tund, slightly to listen. "A person becomes strong through the people around them." Tund nodded because he had heard that teaching many times while growing up. The community protects its members, but it also expects them to respect its values. Ignoring those values often leads to painful consequences. "I forgot that lesson," Tund admitted quietly. Ada looked at him with steady eyes. She wanted him to understand that the lesson was not only about marriage, it was about responsibility to everyone in the community. "When one person chooses selfish desire," she said, "many people feel the damage." Tund understood her meaning clearly. His actions had not only hurt Ada and Kemi, they had also created confusion and conflict within the village itself. The elders had worked hard to restore balance. Days slowly passed after that difficult judgment. Kemi found a small house near the edge of the village, where she began selling food in the market to support her children. Some villagers treated her carefully at first, but over time they saw her working honestly to rebuild her dignity. Though her friendship with Ada remained distant, the hostility slowly faded. Tund worked harder on the farm and spent more time helping neighbors with their daily tasks. He understood that rebuilding trust required consistent actions, not empty promises. People began noticing his efforts, though they still watched him carefully. Trust grows slowly after it has been broken. Ada also changed in quiet ways. Her experience had taught her that sacrifice alone cannot protect a home. Strong communities require honesty, patience, and shared responsibility. She began speaking more often with village women about protecting friendships and supporting each other through difficult times. One evening, the elders gathered again in the village square. They wanted to remind everyone of the lesson hidden inside the painful events. Villagers of all ages came to listen because the story had touched the entire community. The eldest elder spoke calmly to the crowd. "This village witnessed a hard lesson," he said. He paused and looked around at the faces before him. "A person who follows only personal desire can damage many lives." The villagers listened carefully because the truth of that statement had already become clear. Individual choices always ripple outward through the community. Ignoring that connection weakens the bonds that hold people together. But when a community responds with wisdom, the elder continued, broken paths can still lead toward healing. Ada, Tund, and Kemi each stood quietly among the villagers. While hearing those words, their story had become an example for everyone around them. Though the past could not be erased, the future still offered chances for growth. The elder finished his message with one final thought. "In our land, we say that a person is a person because of other people.